thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attendance. And in deference to my friends at the Federal Security Services of Russia, thank you for allowing me this opportunity as well. Anyways, my name is Adam Collins, and as the introduction stated, I am the IB, or one of the 3 IB economics teachers here at the Anglo-American School of Moscow. And as mentioned, I've come to this position after other forms of employment, which obviously included a stint in the US Army, working as an interrogator. So, just to start here really quickly, there's a fundamental misperception in popular culture surrounding the concept of torture and interrogation. And indeed, they're often understood as synonymous, but this is incorrect. I came to this understanding of this difference when these concepts as a result of my experience in the US Army, where I was trained as an interrogator. And this was, of course, in military intelligence, where I was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. So the question that obviously needs to come up is obviously, what is the difference between interrogation and torture? These two are very much separate concepts. So first off, I can't really see that. What is that? This is a little different formatting than what I said. Okay, so what is the difference between these two? So questioning versus interrogation. Let's establish some definitions. When we're talking about questioning, then of course the goal is to obtain the truth. And obviously this is going to be conducted by the police, your parents, and of course your teachers. But this is a little bit different when you're talking about interrogation. Interrogation isn't so much looking to obtain the truth, it's looking to obtain information. So obviously this is conducted by the police, and as you already know, conducted by the military. And this is true in every civilization and certainly every nation on the planet. So the question that comes up is, how do we obtain this information, of course? And to obtain it, then we have to be considerate of the ethical considerations. First of all, is lying acceptable? Is psychological manipulation acceptable? And of course, this is the big one, is physical manipulation acceptable? And this is often called torture. Now, we have to take into consideration also a legal consideration, which obviously comes both nationally and internationally. Now, internationally, we're talking about the Geneva Convention, of course, of which 196 countries are signatories, including both the Russian Federation and the United States. And in the Geneva Accords, then it specifically prohibits torture from taking place. But to understand the nuances, let's look specifically at the definition, which obviously is, torture is the systematic and deliberate infliction of severe mental and physical pain by one person on another or on a third person in order to accomplish the purpose of the former against the will of the latter. This is the UN Charter. This is the Geneva Accord. How this is interpreted is where it gets interesting. Because, of course, as defined by the United States, severe physical and mental pain or suffering means prolonged physical or mental harm. Note the difference. So the question is this torture? You might recognize this photo because this certainly made international news back in 2003. And this is of an Iraqi prisoner of war held at Abu Ghraib prison. Notice that in this photo, which hit the newsstands in practically every country in the world and almost simultaneously, these were photographs that were taken by members of the US military intelligence during their interrogation of Iraqi prisoners of war shortly after the invasion was concluded in Iraq. Now, by UN definition, this clearly is torture. By US definition, it is not, because if you look very carefully, is this person being subjected to prolonged mental and physical harm? And the answer is short-term, possibly. Long-term, no. How about that? Is this torture? Again, the United Nations would declare this as obviously torture, whereas the US would be in disagreement. And of course, we know this one. And this is, of course, called waterboarding. Waterboarding is, of course, the intention of making a candidate, for lack of a better term, feel as if they are going to drown. And in this case, this is not considered torture by US definition. It is not causing prolonged physical or mental harm. This is temporary, uncomfortable, but certainly not prolonged. So the question that obviously comes up is, what is the goal? What is the ultimate purpose behind interrogation, or in this case, torture? And I'm going to break these two in half in terms of dismissing the notion that these are synonymous. But the goal is that You want the individual to willingly give you the information that you need, willingly. Now, the perception, which is held in popular culture, is that physical brutality and pain, meaning negative reinforcement, will compel an individual to be truthful and provide the needed information. You need look only to some popular culture stereotypes, such as the famous Jack Bauer character on 24, who repeatedly would use torture and obviously would win the day. This is Hollywood. This is not reality. Because the reality is simply that torture has never, ever been an effective means of obtaining information. Useful, actionable, reliable information cannot be coerced from an individual. No one can withstand intense physical pain for an extended period of time, and if subjected to it, they will willingly say anything, just to make that stop. Meaning they will confess to crimes they did not commit, they will make up intelligence that you want to hear just to make it stop. And is that particularly useful? Ultimately, we need to reflect on this comment, which I pulled from a man by the name of Bernard Chazal in Princeton University, as quoted in a research paper of his in 2009, where torture offends us through its frontal assault on human dignity. Beyond subverting free will into anti-will, your being tortured does not simply violate you, it makes you violate yourself. It denies something even more fundamental than freedom. It denies personhood. It dehumanizes not only the victim and the torturer, but society as a whole. So, to conclude, I want you to take a look at this photo. Also a very famous photo taken very shortly after his capture, and this is, of course, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was captured in Afghanistan in 2003. He was transferred to Guantanamo Bay in 2006 and became, essentially, for lack of a better term, the poster child for the torture conduct of the United States military. The assumption being that since he was identified as one of the ringleaders for the horrendous 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001, that necessarily through enhanced interrogation methods, as it was described by the Bush administration, that actionable intelligence could be obtained, and therefore we could prevent future terrorist acts from occurring. However, despite multiple enhanced interrogation techniques that were applied at Guantanamo Bay over a long series of time, several months at least, ultimately, the conclusion was that torture didn't work. It didn't elicit any actionable intelligence from suspected terrorists, nor did it foil plots against Americans. And obviously, this was from the Senate Intelligence Committee's report as a result of looking at the CIA's detention and interrogation programs. And this was released in December of 2014. So, while interrogation is both important and vital to a nation's security, torture should be stricken from consideration because of some very simple points. One, torture is illegal by international law. That's already established, and that's been the case for more than 60 years. Torture is morally offensive to the concept of civilization in its utmost. And lastly, and for me personally, most importantly, and what we were taught, obviously, through my experience in the military, was to apply torture means that you have lost the initiative. If you have forced somebody to tell you something, what you get is going to be worthless. You have to get them to the point where they willingly give it to you, which means that obviously it's authentic. Because ultimately torture in and of itself is ineffective and inefficient. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.